Alright guys, welcome back to F1 Drama. Mercedes do not expect to be able to beat Red Bull this season in either championship, but they do intend to stop them in any way possible, planning apparently to live vicariously through Aston Martin by giving them the best engines they have on offer in their pool to try and take down Red Bull at all costs, even if it's not Mercedes themselves doing the damage this season. What does this mean for Alonso, and also what does this mean for this man Lewis Hamilton? Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. Now, Mercedes came out with this tweet today saying, I don't plan on being anywhere else, from Mr. Hamilton himself, wondering whether this guy's going to call it a day. Now, apparently he is eager to help in this recovery project, and Mercedes say, yes, Hamilton's very much on board, he's loving life, we're making progress as a team, but you know, to me it feels like Hamilton did the hard work last season, expecting this season would be a freer ride, to be able to get a few race wins under his belt, if not fully challenge for the championship that he wants in addition to his 7 that he's got already. And of course the car isn't very good, 4th fastest car right now. Hamilton is not happy, as Gianluca Kessler says, and why would he be? Mike Elliott, of course, chief technical guy, under pressure. We talked about that yesterday, that there's rumours that he's going to get ousted if the upgrades they bring fail to deliver results. Hamilton said he's going to stay positive, he's going to be a positive light for the team, but I do wonder how much of this is just words and how much of this Hamilton will really be feeling, you know what, at this point. Does he want to even bother anymore? Especially when, you know, if you look at sports in history, when there's been periods of dominance and such a team then falls off their perch, how long does it usually take for them to get back to the top? It's usually not immediate, it's usually a good few years. I mean, we've seen in Formula 1 with the likes of Red Bull, even you can look at Ferrari, for example, but even Red Bull with Vettel when they dominated from 2010 to 2013, then it took them basically a decade to get back to where they are now. Mercedes win 8 in a row, they've fallen off for the last 2 years. Are they going to be back on top next year? Seems unlikely with all the issues they're suffering internally. So therefore, some have speculated, will Hamilton leave Mercedes and go to another team? I will believe it when I see it. I think this is incredibly unlikely. I don't see why Hamilton would join another team rather than just retire. If Red Bull said, hey, do you want to come here with Verstappen, then maybe part of Hamilton thinks, you know what, why not give it a go in that car? But, you know, unlikely to ever happen. And the fact that people are discussing Hamilton going to Ferrari, now, of course, every F1 driver would kind of like to drive for Ferrari, but would you leave Mercedes and go to Ferrari given they're also in a bit of a shambolic state? No. And will Aston Martin be dropping Stroll for Hamilton anytime soon? No, because it's Lawrence Stroll's son, so it's just not going to happen, but for some reason people talk about it as if it is. So, you know, Hamilton would sooner retire than leave Mercedes to join another team, but Ferrari also in a difficult spot. We know Mercedes are. Fred Vasseur has also reportedly been given the permission to make major changes at Ferrari, and I do feel like this is another difference between Ferrari and other Formula 1 teams, is that it seems like the boss over there, the team principal, does not have quite the freedom. There's higher ups than the team principal that still make some calls at Ferrari, and it does feel like they've operated in that way for some time, because apparently Vasseur has to get permission to fire and hire certain people in critical roles, whereas in other teams the TP just makes that call regardless. But he's apparently gotten the permission to make these changes. Inaki Raida from their strategy team, he got booted back to the factory, I believe, but apparently he might be completely fired now. Other senior figures in Binotto's team are expected to be replaced, so yeah, seems like after the poor race one, after all the optimism from Ferrari about how good their car was going to be, they've fallen flat on those expectations, and they're making internal changes, as probably will Mercedes. So with Mercedes in crisis, with Ferrari thinking, where do we go from here, with Vasseur taking over, making necessary changes that might be there internally, what happens next in terms of the championship fight? Obviously the head aerodynamic guy, David Sanchez, resigned from Ferrari, as we saw just yesterday, and even Helmut Marko says Mercedes are out of the fight, the world title is out of reach, you can't design 2 or 3 cars, they've got to focus on one. Whatever they come up with in terms of Mercedes concept, they're going to miss out on the testing time, and he reckons that basically Mercedes are out of the fight already. He says that it's too early to consider Red Bull the champions, but Mercedes to me are out of it. Ferrari might not be out of it, but already it looks like Leclerc is going to have to take some sort of penalty at some point this season because of the failure that he had there in Bahrain. The car is too slow in race pace, so where is the challenge from the front of the grid apart from the green car in Aston Martin? Now these are the numbers based on the race in Bahrain. This excludes the first 16 laps, so just the hard stints. I believe it probably also includes the second stints for the Red Bulls, which was on the soft tyre as well because their tyre deg is just so good. And these are the numbers over the field. So Verstappen, Perez, equal times, probably because their engineers told them, hey, drive a 1:37.0, and they both pretty much did despite being able to go fast. But Alonso was about 3/10 off, Stroll further back, but still the 4th fastest car. I think Leclerc would have been about 6/10 taken back as well based on his stint before his car blew up, or at least fails. Russell, Hamilton, Sainz, Gasly actually not too far behind, and then Bottas, Zhou, etc. throughout the field. I think K-Mag should have been a bit lower here. There were some mistakes made, but regardless, gets the point across that the Aston is the competitive car, and especially in the hands of Fernando Alonso, especially when Aston Martin themselves say that they have got more upgrades to come, and they're taking a very aggressive approach to this year's car development. To me, if there's any hope of any championship fight this year, it's not going to come from Mercedes or Ferrari. Things might change when we get to Jeddah, but I doubt it. It might have to come from Alonso and Aston Martin, because they were 7th last year in the Constructors. That gives them significantly, not too far off, double the amount of testing time that Red Bull have in terms of wind tunnel and CFD. So they have a big edge there in terms of what developments they can bring to the car, the amount of time they have to refine those developments, and the fact that their car apparently has a lot more to come from it over the season. I don't expect them to beat Verstappen. I don't expect them to win the championship, but I do think that is where the fight this season, if there is going to be one, might have to come from, is from Aston Martin rather than Mercedes or Ferrari. Now, Mercedes, therefore, find themselves in a pretty interesting position where their car is worse than their customer team. And the interesting predicament here is for Toto Wolff, who's also a shareholder of Aston Martin, and Mercedes, who also are shareholders of Aston Martin, because, you know, they own shares. I think even Lawrence Stroll only owns like maybe 17% of the shares or something like that, because obviously he does the racing team, but also it's the whole of Aston Martin. Bit of a complicated setup. But Mercedes do have a stake in the success of that team, and therefore, if Mercedes fall flat on their fate, as they have done so far, and apparently, due to the radical changes coming soon, if this plan does not prove fruitful within 2 races, I imagine within 2 races of them potentially bringing those upgrades, that I think is going to be Imola, so I think that's the 6th race. So we're talking by around about the 8th race of the 23 race season. If Mercedes fail to be competitive at all, then the headquarters at Mercedes have other plans. As a major shareholder of Aston Martin, it prefers to focus on the performance of the customer team. Now, I don't know how valid this is, but it's coming out from GP fans, so there's got to be something behind this. It's still quite remarkable to even read and to consider, but well, I'll go on to read the thing. So the Spanish news media reports that the Mercedes Formula 1 team has received an uncomfortable message from its headquarters. Wolff and his associates have 2 races to show they can turn the tide. Now, as I say, I don't know if that's 2 races after the upgrades, or if that's 2 races from now. If this is not possible, though, attention will shift to Aston Martin, a team of which Mercedes is not only a supplier, but also a major shareholder. When Mercedes headquarters opt for a full focus on Aston Martin, it also means Hamilton will no longer get the best engines. In that case, they will go to Alonso. So I'll just finish out the article here before we discuss it. The reality is that despite the engines being the same Mercedes engines in the Aston Martin car and in the Mercedes AMG, whatever they call it, Formula 1 car, the engine should be the same, but the reality is there will be slight differences, and, you know, same hands, same materials, but slight deviations do mean there will be changes in performance, and some engines are better than others. I mean, I think we saw whatever engine they put in Hamilton's car towards the end of the 2021 season was a particularly special power unit, and they probably saved their best to last, even though it might have been the same as what they had earlier in the season, technically. So logically, the engines with the best performance are usually given to the Mercedes team, and the customer teams get the worst engines, which is understandable, and they have to kind of suck it up. However, if Aston Martin are the most competitive team, and the only team that Mercedes have a stake in that actually has a chance to challenge Mr. Max Verstappen and Red Bull, then would they just give their best engines to Aston Martin and Alonso? Like, maybe that's possible. And if Mercedes headquarters decides it's more attractive from a sporting and financial point of view to help Aston Martin to success, then the best engines will no longer go to Hamilton, but to Alonso. According to the Objectivo, the message from the head office has not been well received by the Formula 1 team of the German car brand. It also is questionable with what news this means for the negotiations between Mercedes and Hamilton, because of course they'll want him to stay on for at least 1 more year and extend his deal, which is currently expiring at the end of the season. So what do you guys think about this? Because apparently Mercedes HQ have said to Mercedes AMG Formula 1 Petronas, whatever it's called, team, that look, you've got a couple of races here, maybe after these upgrades arrive, to prove your car is actually any good, or we're giving our best engines to Alonso to try and ensure that Aston Martin can have the best success, best for Aston Martin, best for Mercedes bottom line, and also best to try and stop Red Bull. Because if Mercedes themselves can't stop Red Bull, and they can have some influence on trying to allow Aston Martin to have the best chance, then I guess that's in their best interest. It's obviously not in the best interest of the Mercedes AMG Petronas Formula 1 team, whatever, but it's in maybe the best interest of the HQ guys back at headquarters making the calls, looking at the numbers on the bottom line, and if the Mercedes F1 team isn't delivering what they expect them to deliver based on their performance so over the last decade, then changes will be necessary and changes shall be made. And as I say, with this potential advantage for Aston Martin and Alonso down the line, probably not the case immediately, but we know that Aston Martin's straight line performance hasn't quite been where it might need to be over time to be able to handle Red Bull and overtake them in a straight line, this type of stuff. That extra advantage could prove critical as the season progresses if Aston Martin can make as many changes and as many upgrades as they are saying they will and as they are intending to make. And I'll be honest, right, I discussed Aston Martin before the season quite a lot. They were super gung-ho on their aggressive development they were making on their car, all the changes, how quick their car was going to be as it is in the simulator, how quick it was going to be on track. And I said, look, I'm pretty confident that Aston Martin this year might be the 4th fastest car. I, of course, wouldn't have gone any further than that, but, from what we've seen so far, they're certainly the 2nd fastest car. They were around Bahrain, comfortably faster than certainly Sainz's Ferrari and the Mercedes for sure, in the hands of both Stroll, really, and also certainly Alonso. Where can they be with Red Bull? We'll see. Red Bull have more in the tank, but if they can develop fast and effectively with the best Mercedes engines they have on offer, then maybe there is still an outside chance that somehow Alonso could deliver a 3rd World Drivers' Championship win. And of course, Mercedes are going for radical changes, and they will need to deliver on that quickly if they want any chance of maintaining good relationships with Hamilton, but also good relationships with their own headquarters that potentially are considering divesting some of their best parts onto a particular customer team. Very interesting stuff. Intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Also, some words from Hamilton here on Verstappen, saying that now Verstappen's already won a title or 2 and has got that experience under his belt, he doesn't expect Max to slip up at all, and basically reckons the season is done in terms of the championship results. But, maybe Mercedes HQ have other ideas. But very much intrigued your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.